The autumn rain hammered against the towering spires of St. Patrick's Cathedral as Margaret O'Sullivan clutched her rosary beads with trembling fingers. At 73, she had witnessed countless miracles of faith, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what was about to unfold on this ordinary Tuesday evening in October 2023. Father Michael Therese finished lighting the last candle near the altar of Our Lady of Guadalupe when he noticed something peculiar. The air itself seemed to shimmer, as if touched by an invisible presence. The handful of evening worshippers, no more than 15 souls seeking solace after another demanding day in New York City, began to feel an inexplicable warmth spreading through the cathedral's cold stone walls. If you've ever experienced something that defied explanation, something that touched your soul in ways words cannot describe, then you'll understand the profound journey we're about to embark on together. Stay with us as we unveil one of the most extraordinary spiritual encounters ever documented in modern America. Margaret had come to St. Patrick's every Tuesday for 47 years, ever since her husband Patrick passed away from cancer. The cathedral had become her sanctuary, a place where she could speak to God without the noise of the bustling city drowning out her prayers. Tonight felt different, though. The usual echo of footsteps seemed muffled, as if the very air had grown thick with anticipation. Dr. Sarah Chun, a prominent cardiologist at Mount Sinai Hospital, sat 3 pews behind Margaret. At 45, Sarah had lost much of her childhood faith through years of witnessing suffering in hospital corridors. Yet something had drawn her here tonight, a pull she couldn't rationally explain. Her scientific mind rebelled against such notions, but her heart yearned for something beyond the sterile world of medicine. In the front row, 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez knelt beside his grandmother, Rosa. The boy had been battling leukemia for 2 years, and Rosa brought him here every week, praying desperately for a miracle. Tommy's pale face bore the marks of countless chemotherapy sessions, but his eyes still held the innocent wonder that only children possess. Father Therese noticed the unusual stillness that had descended upon the cathedral. Even the sounds from Fifth Avenue seemed distant and muted. The priest had served at St. Patrick's for 12 years, and he had developed an instinct for the spiritual atmosphere of his parish. Tonight, something extraordinary was brewing. As the evening service progressed, Margaret noticed that the statue of the Virgin Mary near the altar seemed different somehow. The carved marble face appeared more luminous, more alive than she had ever seen it. She blinked several times, wondering if her aging eyes were playing tricks on her, but the sensation only grew stronger. The transformation began subtly, like dawn breaking over the Hudson River. Margaret felt her rosary beads growing warm in her hands, not the artificial warmth of heated metal, but something deeper, more profound. It was the kind of warmth she remembered from her mother's embrace decades ago, a comfort that seemed to emanate from her very soul. Dr. Chun looked up from her prayer book, her analytical mind immediately noting the changes around her. The temperature in the cathedral had risen noticeably, despite the October chill outside. More puzzling still, the air seemed to carry a fragrance she couldn't identify, something floral and pure, unlike any perfume or incense she had ever encountered. Young Tommy tugged at his grandmother's sleeve. "Abuela," he whispered in Spanish, "do you smell the flowers?" Rosa Rodriguez looked down at her grandson with surprise. The boy's sense of smell had been severely affected by his treatments, and he hadn't been able to detect fragrances for months. Yet now his face was lifted toward the altar, breathing deeply with wonder. Father Therese paused in his evening prayers, his trained senses alert to every nuance of the moment. In his years of service, he had learned to distinguish between genuine spiritual phenomena and the products of overwrought imagination. What he was experiencing now fell into neither category. It was something entirely unprecedented. The statue of the Virgin Mary, carved from pure Carrara marble by Italian artisans more than a century ago, began to emit a soft, pearl-like radiance. It wasn't the harsh artificial light of the cathedral's electric bulbs, but something organic and alive, as if the stone itself had become a conduit for divine energy. Margaret gasped audibly, her weathered hands covering her mouth in amazement. After nearly 5 decades of faithful attendance, she had memorized every detail of that statue, every fold in the Virgin's robes, every serene line of her face. But now, impossibly, the carved features seemed to be moving with the gentle rhythm of actual breathing. Dr. Chen's scientific training kicked into high gear. She began mentally cataloging every observable phenomenon: the temperature increase, the unusual fragrance, the apparent luminescence of the marble statue. Yet even as her rational mind sought logical explanations, something deeper within her recognized that she was witnessing something that transcended the boundaries of empirical science. The other parishioners, an elderly businessman who came here to escape his loneliness, a young teacher seeking guidance for her troubled students, a construction worker whose marriage was falling apart, all began to notice the extraordinary changes occurring around them. One by one, they lifted their eyes from their private prayers and focused on the increasingly radiant figure before them. What would you do if you found yourself witnessing something that challenged everything you thought you knew about reality? Our witnesses are about to face exactly that choice, and their responses will reveal truths about faith, doubt, and the miraculous that will stay with you long after this story ends. At exactly 7:47 p.m., according to the cathedral's ancient clock tower, the impossible became undeniable. The marble statue of the Virgin Mary began to move with fluid, lifelike grace. Her head turned slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, until her carved eyes seemed to gaze directly upon each person in the cathedral with infinite compassion. Margaret O'Sullivan felt her 73-year-old heart skip a beat, but not from fear, from pure, overwhelming joy. The face that now looked upon her was more beautiful than any artistic representation she had ever seen, more real than reality itself. It was the face of perfect love, unmarred by the pain and cynicism that marked so much of human existence. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as she reached for her phone to record what was happening, but something stopped her. This wasn't meant to be captured and dissected, it was meant to be experienced, absorbed into the very fabric of one's being. Her medical training had taught her to trust in evidence and data, but her heart was teaching her a different kind of truth. The Virgin's lips moved, and though no audible words filled the cathedral, each person present heard a message specifically meant for them. For Margaret, it was a confirmation that her decades of faithful prayer had not gone unnoticed, and that her beloved Patrick was at peace in the eternal presence of God. Little Tommy Rodriguez heard something that filled his 8-year-old heart with hope he hadn't felt since his diagnosis. The message wasn't about miraculous healing, it was about courage, about the strength to face whatever lay ahead with faith and dignity. His grandmother Rosa wept silently as she witnessed her grandson's face transform with a peace that surpassed understanding. For Dr. Chun, the message was more complex and challenging. She heard a call to merge her scientific knowledge with spiritual wisdom, to understand that healing involved more than just treating symptoms. It required touching the human soul. Her years of rationalist thinking hadn't been wasted. They had prepared her for this moment of greater understanding. Father Therese found himself experiencing something beyond his theological training. This wasn't the studied mysticism he had read about in seminary texts. This was direct, immediate contact with the divine. He felt his own faith, strong as it had always been, expanding to encompass mysteries he had never imagined possible. The construction worker, whose marriage was crumbling under the weight of financial stress and miscommunication, received guidance about forgiveness and patience. The lonely businessman understood for the first time that his wealth meant nothing without connection to something greater than himself. The young teacher felt renewed purpose in her calling to nurture and guide the next generation. As the manifestation continued, the cathedral itself seemed to participate in the miracle. The stained glass windows, though it was night outside, began to glow with internal light, casting rainbow patterns across the walls and floor. The very stones of the ancient building hummed with a frequency that resonated in the bones of every witness. The Virgin Mary's presence filled every corner of St. Patrick's Cathedral with an energy that defied description. It wasn't merely visual or auditory, it was a complete sensory experience that touched dimensions of human perception that most people never access in their entire lifetimes. Margaret O'Sullivan felt years of grief and loneliness melting away like snow in spring sunshine. The message she received wasn't about bringing her husband back or changing the past. It was about understanding that love transcends death, that the bonds formed in life continue to exist in ways that human understanding can barely grasp. For nearly 50 years, she had wondered if her prayers were heard, if her faith meant anything in a world that seemed increasingly indifferent to spiritual matters. Now she knew with absolute certainty that every prayer, every act of kindness, every moment of faith contributed to a vast tapestry of divine love that connected all souls across time and space. Dr. Sarah Chun experienced what could only be described as a healing of the heart. Her years of medical practice had shown her so much suffering that she had begun to question whether there was any benevolent force in the universe. Now she understood that healing and suffering were not opposites. They were part of the same divine process that transforms souls and brings them closer to their true purpose. The message she received was specific and practical. She was to expand her practice to include spiritual counseling alongside medical treatment. She would become a bridge between the world of science and the realm of faith, helping other healthcare professionals understand that treating the human body without acknowledging the human spirit left healing incomplete. Young Tommy Rodriguez experienced something that would stay with him for the rest of his life, however long or short that might be. The Virgin Mary's presence filled him with an understanding that his illness was not a punishment or a random cruelty. It was an opportunity for his family and community to experience the depths of love and compassion that only emerge during times of crisis. His grandmother Rosa received confirmation of something she had always known in her heart. Her prayers were not just wishful thinking or cultural tradition. They were real communications with divine beings who cared deeply about human welfare. She would continue to bring Tommy to the cathedral, not just seeking a miracle cure, but knowing that every moment spent in prayer strengthened their connection to eternal love. The messages these witnesses received would change their lives forever, but the most profound revelations are yet to come. What we're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about the nature of divine intervention in human affairs. Father Therese found himself understanding his vocation in entirely new terms. He had always seen his role as serving his congregation and maintaining church traditions, but now he realized he was part of something much larger, a network of spiritual workers whose mission was to keep alive the human connection to the divine in an increasingly secular world. The other witnesses, each carrying their own burdens and seeking their own answers, received personalized guidance that addressed their deepest needs and fears. The businessman learned that his loneliness could be transformed into compassion for others who struggled with isolation. The construction worker understood that his marital problems were opportunities to practice the kind of unconditional love that the Virgin Mary represented. Dr. Sarah Chen's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all the witnesses, precisely because she had the most to lose by accepting what she was experiencing. Her entire professional identity was built on empirical evidence, peer-reviewed research, and rational analysis. What was happening in St. Patrick's Cathedral challenged every foundation of her worldview. Yet as she sat in that pew, surrounded by the impossible made manifest, Sarah found herself accessing memories she had buried for decades. She remembered being 5 years old, sitting in her grandmother's lap in a small Buddhist temple in San Francisco's Chinatown, feeling the same sense of presence and protection that now enveloped her in this Catholic cathedral. Her grandmother had told her stories about bodhisattvas, enlightened beings who chose to remain in the world to help others achieve enlightenment. The Virgin Mary, Sarah realized, was Christianity's equivalent of these compassionate figures, a bridge between human suffering and divine love. The scientific part of her mind continued to function, but now it was informed by a deeper understanding. She began to see how her medical training could be enhanced rather than contradicted by spiritual awareness. The human body, she understood, was not just a collection of biological systems. It was a vessel for consciousness, for soul, for something that connected each individual to the vast network of universal compassion. As she watched the Virgin Mary's luminous presence move through the cathedral, Sarah felt called to document what was happening, not for scientific publication, but for the sake of preserving testimony to the miraculous. She would become a witness in the truest sense, someone whose life was forever changed by direct contact with the divine. Meanwhile, Margaret O'Sullivan experienced what mystics throughout history have called the peace that passeth understanding. At 73, she had lived through enough sorrow and joy to recognize when something transcendent was occurring. This wasn't mass hallucination or wishful thinking. This was genuine contact with the sacred dimension of existence. Her decades of faithful attendance at St. Patrick's hadn't been a waste of time or a quaint tradition. They had been preparation for this moment. Every prayer, every rosary recited, every candle lit had been building toward this encounter with divine love in its purest form. The Virgin Mary's message to Margaret was simple but profound. Her life had mattered, her prayers had been heard, and her example of faithful devotion had inspired others in ways she would never fully understand. She was to continue her weekly visits to the cathedral, but now she would come not as a suppliant seeking comfort, but as a living witness to the reality of divine presence in the world. Little Tommy Rodriguez clung to his grandmother's hand as waves of peace washed over his small illness-weakened body. The Virgin Mary's presence didn't promise him a miraculous cure. Instead, it filled him with courage to face whatever lay ahead. He would continue his medical treatments, but now he would do so with the knowledge that he was held in divine love regardless of the outcome. The manifestation at St. Patrick's Cathedral lasted exactly 1 hour and 13 minutes, but its effects would ripple outward through the lives of the witnesses for years to come. As the Virgin Mary's luminous presence gradually faded, each person in the cathedral understood that they had been entrusted with something precious, a direct experience of divine love that they were meant to share with the world. Margaret O'Sullivan became an unofficial guardian of the story. In the weeks that followed, she found herself approached by people who had heard rumors of what happened that Tuesday evening. She spoke carefully but honestly about her experience, never embellishing or dramatizing, but simply testifying to what she had witnessed. Her apartment became a gathering place for other elderly parishioners who had experienced spiritual encounters throughout their lives. They formed an informal support group, sharing their stories and praying together, creating a community of faith that strengthened everyone involved. Dr. Sarah Chun returned to Mount Sinai Hospital transformed. Her colleagues noticed the change immediately. She spent more time with patients, listened more deeply to their concerns, and seemed to understand something about healing that went beyond medical textbooks. She began integrating meditation and prayer into her treatment recommendations, always respecting patients' beliefs while offering spiritual resources alongside medical interventions. Within 6 months, Dr. Chun had established a new program at the hospital called Holistic Healing, which provided chaplaincy services, meditation rooms, and support groups for patients and families dealing with serious illnesses. The program became a model for other hospitals across the country, demonstrating that acknowledging the spiritual dimension of healing actually improved medical outcomes. Young Tommy Rodriguez continued his leukemia treatments with a peace that amazed his medical team. His positive attitude and courage inspired other children in the pediatric ward, and his story became a source of hope for families facing similar challenges. Whether or not he would be cured remained uncertain, but his quality of life and emotional resilience improved dramatically. His grandmother Rosa became a volunteer at the hospital, sharing her story with other families and helping them connect with their own faith traditions. She organized prayer circles and meditation sessions, creating a support network that helped parents and children navigate the difficult journey of serious illness with dignity and hope. Father Therese found his ministry expanding in unexpected directions. Word of the miraculous event spread quietly through the Catholic community, and he began receiving visitors from around the world, people seeking spiritual guidance, healing, and connection to the divine. He handled the attention carefully, never sensationalizing what had occurred, but always willing to share his testimony with those who approached him sincerely. The transformation of these ordinary people into witnesses of the extraordinary reveals something profound about how divine encounters work in our world. But the most surprising developments are still ahead, as their stories begin to intersect in ways none of them could have imagined. 3 months after the miraculous event at St. Patrick's Cathedral, Cardinal Thomas McKenna received a formal request from the Vatican to investigate reports of supernatural phenomena. As the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal McKenna had dealt with numerous claims of miracles throughout his career, and he approached each case with careful skepticism tempered by genuine openness to divine intervention. The Cardinal assembled a team of investigators that included theologians, psychologists, and scientists. Dr. Sarah Chun was asked to provide medical testimony about any healings that might have occurred, while Father Therese was interviewed extensively about his observations and the subsequent changes in his parish community. Margaret O'Sullivan proved to be an ideal witness. Her decades of faithful attendance at the cathedral, combined with her clear memory and honest demeanor, provided credible testimony that impressed even the most skeptical investigators. She answered every question thoughtfully, never claiming more than what she had actually experienced, but never wavering in her conviction that something miraculous had occurred. The investigation revealed several interesting facts. Security cameras in the cathedral had malfunctioned during the exact time period of the reported manifestation, showing only static for 1 hour and 13 minutes. Temperature sensors showed an unexplained increase in ambient temperature during the same period. Most intriguingly, spectrographic analysis of air samples taken from the cathedral the next day revealed trace amounts of rose oil, despite the fact that no roses had been present in the building. Dr. Chen's testimony proved particularly compelling. As a medical professional with no prior history of religious mysticism, her conversion experience carried significant weight with the investigative team. She provided detailed documentation of the positive changes in her patients' outcomes since she had begun incorporating spiritual elements into her treatment protocols. Young Tommy Rodriguez became the most closely monitored case. While his leukemia hadn't been miraculously cured, his white blood cell counts had stabilized in ways that surprised his oncologists. More significantly, his psychological resilience and positive attitude had improved so dramatically that he became a case study in the relationship between spiritual well-being and physical healing. The Vatican investigators were particularly interested in the consistency of the witnesses' accounts. Despite coming from different backgrounds and having varying levels of religious education, all 15 people present that evening described remarkably similar experiences. They all reported the same unusual fragrance, the same sense of overwhelming peace, and the same conviction that they had encountered divine presence. Father Therese provided historical context that proved valuable to the investigation. He had researched the cathedral's records and discovered that the statue of the Virgin Mary had been donated in 1952 by a family whose daughter had been miraculously cured of polio after praying to the Virgin of Lourdes. The statue had been carved from marble taken from the same quarry that provided stone for the original shrine at Lourdes, creating a direct physical connection to one of Catholicism's most authenticated miracle sites. As news of the Vatican investigation spread, St. Patrick's Cathedral began receiving visitors from around the world. Pilgrims came seeking their own encounters with the divine, while skeptics arrived hoping to debunk what they saw as mass hysteria or religious delusion. Father Therese found himself managing crowds that sometimes numbered in the thousands, all drawn by stories of the miraculous manifestation. Margaret O'Sullivan discovered that her role as a witness carried responsibilities she had never anticipated. Religious journalists sought interviews, documentary filmmakers wanted to record her testimony, and fellow Catholics looked to her for guidance about how to strengthen their own faith. She handled the attention with the same quiet dignity that had characterized her decades of faithful prayer. Dr. Sarah Chun became an international speaker on the integration of spirituality and medicine. Her program at Mount Sinai Hospital attracted attention from medical professionals worldwide, leading to invitations to conferences in London, Rome, Tokyo, and São Paulo. She used these opportunities to share not just her professional insights, but her personal testimony about the transformative power of divine encounter. The most unexpected development came from Tommy Rodriguez's story. His courage in facing leukemia, informed by his experience at the cathedral, inspired the creation of a foundation dedicated to supporting families dealing with childhood cancer. The Tommy's Light Foundation provided not just financial assistance, but spiritual counseling and support groups that helped families find meaning and hope during their darkest hours. Cardinal McKenna's final report to the Vatican was carefully worded but ultimately positive. While stopping short of declaring the event a formal miracle, the report acknowledged that extraordinary spiritual phenomena had occurred at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and that the positive effects on the witnesses' lives provided compelling evidence of genuine divine intervention. 6 months after that extraordinary Tuesday evening, the 15 witnesses continued to gather monthly at St. Patrick's Cathedral for a special prayer service. They had become a family united by their shared experience of the miraculous, supporting each other through life's ongoing challenges, while maintaining their connection to the divine presence they had encountered together. The Virgin Mary's statue returned to its normal marble appearance, but those who had witnessed its transformation knew that the capacity for divine manifestation remained. They understood that miracles aren't just supernatural interruptions of natural law, they are revelations of the sacred dimension that underlies all existence, waiting to be recognized by those who approach life with open hearts and faithful spirits. Margaret O'Sullivan, now 74, continues her weekly visits to St. Patrick's Cathedral. But she no longer comes as a lonely widow seeking comfort. She comes as a living witness to the reality that divine love permeates every aspect of human existence, available to anyone willing to open their hearts to its transformative power. Dr. Sarah Chen's work has revolutionized how her hospital approaches patient care, demonstrating that acknowledging the spiritual dimension of healing doesn't diminish scientific medicine, it completes it. Her story proves that faith and reason aren't enemies, but partners in the quest to understand and serve human wholeness. Tommy Rodriguez, now 9 years old, faces each day of his treatment with courage that amazes everyone who meets him. His story reminds us that miracles aren't always about changing our circumstances. Sometimes they're about changing how we respond to unchangeable circumstances, finding grace and meaning even in the midst of suffering. The manifestation at St. Patrick's Cathedral stands as a testament to the truth that the divine hasn't abandoned our modern world. In the heart of New York City, surrounded by skyscrapers and subway systems, ancient truths about love, faith, and divine presence continue to reveal themselves to those who seek with sincere hearts. The witnesses to this miraculous event discovered that encountering the divine isn't the end of their story. It's the beginning of a new chapter filled with purpose, hope, and connection to something greater than themselves. What chapter might be waiting to begin in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more extraordinary stories of faith, hope, and divine intervention in our modern world.